Hello again from Central Virginia. It's that time of year when you're not doing that much in the garden, so I don't have a lot to tell you about things going on in the garden. So as we move into winter, I thought I would include more recipes that I do, ways that I make dinner, call it What's for Dinner Tonight. I thought I would also be doing some reviews of different techniques and books about gardening that I have read and would like to share with you. So tonight I'm just going to do What's for Dinner. And what's for dinner is what happens to on a lot of times when you look in your fridge and there's no meat or anything that's been thawed, and you're just trying to figure, you have a little of this and a little of that. You don't want to waste it, and you want something that's good and warming and wholesome and a complete meal. And so to me, this time of year particularly, it's soup season, and I embrace it wholeheartedly. So tonight I'm going to make a soup that is made with ingredients that I just have a little bit of. I have a little chicken broth, I have a little canned tomatoes, I have a little rice, I have a little corn, a little of this and a little of that, and we're going to put it together for a delicious, whole, and wholesome meal. So let's get started. As I said, this is what I'm going to make when I have a little of this and a little of that. Very flexible recipe. And for my protein base for this meal, I'm going to use some brown lentils and a little bit of leftover brown rice. There's a little less than a cup in there. I also have a little leftover corn. Not enough for any single meal, but enough for this soup. For the aromatics, I'm going to be using 1 onion. I'm going to chop that up. I'm going to chop up this carrot. I've got a few garlic cloves, which I'm going to mince up, and 1 hot pepper. This is a Carolina cayenne pepper, but you don't have to use a red pepper. I just like a little bit of spice and heat in my soup. All right, what other things? My bases are going to be some chicken broth, about 2 cups, equal parts chicken broth and crushed tomatoes. If you had a little leftover tomato sauce or some tomato paste, you could throw that in instead. I'm also going to add some sun-dried tomatoes because I think that's going to give this a little extra oomph and a level of depth. Now, these are the Brussels sprout greens that I had trimmed off of my Brussels sprouts. If you watch that video on Brussels sprouts, I'm just going to chop these up, the entire thing, including these stems, and I'm going to put that into the soup. The stems will go in earlier. The leaves will go in at the last moment. For herbs, I'm going to be using oregano. I'm going to be using cumin, which is one of my favorites. And I'm also going to throw some celery seed in addition to salt and pepper as usual. I'm going to start by chopping up my garlic, chopping up my carrots, and chopping up my onion. And then we'll just saute those in olive oil for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll add in the broth and the tomatoes. I told my great niece, Anne Marie, who's one of the people behind getting this YouTube channel up and going, that she's in her first job out of college, and I told her I would do some simple videos for her and teach her how to cook for herself and for her roommates and save a bunch of money. She was quite astonished that, gee, living on your own costs a lot of money. Yep, it does. But you can eat well on not a lot of money. I mean, the amount of money for these ingredients is so minimal. So, Anne Marie, this video is for you. Learn to make soup and you'll never be hungry, and you'll always have something delicious. I'm making this soup just for me. This could be easily served probably 4 people with a single serving, but these few days I'm here all by my little lonesome, so I'm cooking for me. And sometimes when you're cooking just for one person, it's hard to get inspired and to take the time to do something nourishing and good. So I have decided, I'm trying not to fall into that trap, but I find sometimes the recipes there's just too much, and I get tired of eating one thing over and over and over again. So maybe I'll develop some recipes thinking about my dear niece Anne Marie and others who are living just with one other person or by themselves, kind of cooking well for one person. There's no reason at all, just for one person, that you can't eat well. And sitting down to enjoy a meal, whether or not you're alone or with others, is a very important part of being human. Okay, there we go. Brussels sprout stems and Brussels sprouts. Chop these kind of fine. If you have just a little bit of a couple cabbage leaves, a couple kale leaves, anything like that, goes great in soup. And think about the power punch it's going to pack of nutrient value. The final thing I'm going to chop up, or at least cut up a little bit, are a few of my sun-dried tomatoes. I have not reconstituted these because they're going to get reconstituted when they're cooking. This is not a necessary thing, but if you happen to have some sun-dried tomatoes on hand, it's a great way to amp up the flavor of your soup. As far as the pepper, for this particular one, I'm just going to poke holes in it and I'm going to put it in whole. Now that everything's chopped, we're just going to put some olive oil in a pan, put it over kind of medium heat, and I'm going to heat that up and then saute the carrots and the onions and the garlic for about 5 to 10 minutes. All right, time is up. Let's take a look. Actually, better than taking a look is taking a smell. And you'll begin to smell that lovely waft of the vegetables that are releasing their aromatic now. The vegetables are softening nicely. And before I put my broth and things in, I'm just going to put some cumin in. I'm going to put cumin in, and I don't measure, but I love cumin. So I'm going to give it a few shakes. Probably about a good hefty full teaspoon or two. And I'm going to give that a stir around, and I'm going to let it go for about, a minute. You know me, I'm completely inconsistent and I do a lot of things by whims. Here are some coriander seeds, and I'm just going to also take about that many and throw them in here as well. Okay, that's been going for about a minute. The next thing I'm going to do is pour in the chicken broth. Here go the canned tomatoes, the crushed tomatoes in. At this point, I'm going to turn the heat up and I'm going to bring it up to a boil. I'm also going to add some salt. This is I'm using sea salt. I'm going to add several grinds of fresh pepper. A little salt is fine, but if you learn to use herbs and spices, then you really find that your need for salt is minimized. Okay, this is now boiling, and so I'm going to add some lentils. I'm not going to make this just as a lentil soup. This is more of a vegetable soup. So I'm not adding a ton of lentils. You can add more, about like that. They will inflate. Again, I like to layer in my flavors. I'm going to add some oregano, about that much. I'm going to throw in just a little bit of celery seed. If I had celery, which is not my favorite vegetable, I would probably just put the celery in here, but I'm going to add a little bit of celery seed. I'm going to add at this point my sun-dried tomatoes. And I'm going to let that go for about 10 minutes. It's been about 10 minutes. Lentils cook very, very quickly. I'm using lentils, but you can really use any bean or legume that you want. If you like canned things, you can throw a can in instead. So now I have probably about maybe a half a cup to a 3/4 cup of rice. This is brown rice. You can use any kind of rice or no rice. You could also use a potato. That's going to thicken the soup a little bit. So I'm going to throw that in. This has already been cooked. It's my leftovers. So if you have leftover carry-out or something and you've just got a little rice sitting around, go ahead and throw it in. I'm sort of a health nut, so I use brown rice. And I'm also going to put in the Brussels sprout stems because they're a little tougher. And I'm going to stir that up. And I'm going to put the top back on and let it continue to cook for about, let's talk about maybe 5 more minutes. And now I'm going to finish off the soup. I'm going to be putting in some frozen corn kernels. Because they're frozen, they're going to bring down the temperature of the soup. So I'm going to raise it up just a little bit. The final thing you want to do is to add in whatever greens you're using. We're going to cook this for about 2 minutes. Now this step is totally unnecessary, but I think every soup should have a little bit of sparkle. So my sparkle is, I had one wedge of lemon left. You know how you have one wedge of lemon left in your fridge? Well, I'm going to take that one wedge of lemon and I'm going to give it a good squeeze The soup has been turned off, and I'm going to give it a good squeeze into that soup. Now, here's the thing. If you're by yourself, do cook and do set a table and sit down and eat. Don't turn your TV on. Don't turn your computer on. Just have a meal and think about the moment. Live in that moment. Good food is good for the soul. It's good for your spirit. And that's what I believe in, among other things. So let's take a look and see how this soup is. Good soup. So as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're well. Take care. Bye. Rice. This is brown rice.